2 minutes. I've got something to play you. There was a question around what is creativity. It's something really cool. It's quite artsy, but if ever there was a room, I think this was one that will appreciate it. Secunda's going to come up. He's going to do some painting with light for us, which is something new for me. I've seen it online, but I've never seen it done IRL. So let's see how that goes.
There are people who talk about the creative process with such humility. You know, there's a sense that something larger than yourself has worked its way through you. To paraphrase Khalil Gibran's notion about children, the creative process, creativity comes through you, but not from you. Though it is with you, it belongs not to you. Right? You know, this notion that we are the frontal lobes of the universe. And so when we when we vocalize, when we utter inspiration, what are we actually doing? Are we creating something that isn't there, or are we merely transcribing, right? The notion of inspiration means we're breathing in and exhaling what we've taken in. So we're merely transcribing the observation of what is. We're reporting. We are all cosmic psychonauts. The creative process is merely what we brought back as reporters of the news. When we go to Plato's realm of ideals, we are as navigators, we are as Dorothy going to Oz, seeing the world through a different lens, seeing reality through a different operating system, a different set of filters, and thus be able to read it different, to see something that others can't, and then bring that back, and then share that back. And I think that that's what's happening through creativity, and that's why we should be humble about it. Respect the gods. There's poetry in every art.
Hey guys, how are we all doing? Good. My name is Takunda Shepherd Chikomo, and I'm a photographer. And today we're going to be speaking on light painting, which is something that I found to be really interesting, and I would truly appreciate being able to share this with you. So, just a brief introduction about myself. The reason why I call myself P. Smith is because I'm just simply embracing who I am or what it is that I am. The P in my name stands for photographer, and the Smith stands for wordsmith, someone who's exceptional at what they do in terms of words. So, as a storyteller at heart, I try and focus on telling people's stories, because I believe that we all have a story to tell. And as a creative, that's where I come through. So apart from being a photographer, I do have books written, some of which are in poetry, short stories, and also I do have my photography book, which is back there at the exhibition table. And my photography journey started in 2019 when a friend invited me to shoot a graduation for them, and I was like, oh, this is fun, which consequently led me to drop out. I am here. And before I go further, I was thinking of jokes that I'll try and tell to try and lighten things up, and then I realized that I am a photographer. My life is already a joke as it is. So, what you see now on the screen is right there at the top left, that's Only Fan. That is a poetry EP that I've written, and it is also available on Spotify. Maonero, that is a book on photography where I challenge the perception, which is also back there. We'll see it in the exhibition that will come through. Deflowered and A Letter to My Blesser. These are also books that I've written in poetry and short stories. And then that is the exhibition image that is right there at the top, at the bottom, which is also going to be available for you to see. So in this presentation, I'm going to introduce you to what light painting is. So we're going to touch onto the basics so that someone who's new to light painting can have an idea of what it is so that you don't get scared. I remember the first time that I was introduced to Adobe Lightroom, Photoshop. Sure. All those things, tools, that's how scary that thing is. But as time went on and as somebody showed me how it goes, I was like, maybe it's not that hard. So I'm also having the same experience now with, what do you call this one? DaVinci Resolve, because I'm trying to move from Premiere Pro. And then from there, in the second part of my presentation, then I'll show you some of the ways through which you can be able to use your camera to create light painting effects. So that part then gets technical and fully hands-on. So this presentation for you is for someone who's looking to find that inner child within them. I always say this about myself. The reason why I started photography was simply because it awakens the little child within me. I find myself dancing in my shoes and I'm like, ooh, this is it. So this presentation, I'm hoping that after I am done, you would also find that within yourself. The themes that I'm going to cover on are light painting, that is the fundamentals, where you begin, light painting and hybrid photography, where I show you what is starburst effect, and then light painting and in-camera effects, where we do some zoom burst and kinetic light painting. And also I'll jump onto light painting and image fragmentation. I'll define all these terms as we go through it so that it also gets clear for you. Introduction. Light painting in itself is a concept that involves using visible light. That is the light that we can be able to see, so that it paints or it creates an effect within our camera whilst it is held for a long exposure. By long exposure, I then mean to say that the camera is just exposed for a longer period, unless when you just capture it. And then from there, we also have a type of light painting, which is kinetic light painting, where we have the camera moving on the axis of your tripod, also on a long exposure. From there, we have light painting, which also involves illuminating the subject, but you do not have to be within the frame, whereby we have, for example, a tree or an old house during the night, and then you just you shine some light from within, while you're also not within the frame. That is also light painting or light drawing. As you can see from that tree there, the individual or the photographer does not get within the frame, it just illuminates the light from a distance onto the tree. The essential tools. Basically, for you to start light painting, what you need is your camera. And oftentimes people ask me, what camera should I use? And just to quote one of my mentors, the camera that works. Whichever camera shoots is whichever camera that you can use, regardless whether it's 35 millimeter analog film, or if you're shooting an old DSLR, or if you want to be fancy, the new mirrorless camera system. Do that. Whichever works is whichever you can shoot with. And then you're gonna need a tripod. Those are some of the basics that you need, and a remote shutter release, or even if you have some of the much technical cameras like there are nowadays, you can use a shutter release control within your cell phone, like Canon does, and then you can just use that to trigger the shutter so that it captures from within that. And also a stopwatch to just help you shutter in times of when you need to do a countdown for your long exposure. And then you will need a light source. There are many types of light sources that you can use, from reflectors, from tubes, from tungsten tubes, and all these other alternatives that can be available for you. Whichever effect you're trying to achieve, you can use that and that will be effective. And then color gels are just then for you to get taste, or to just get a different feel of the image. You can use them to just get that within the shots. The settings. Usually, I always tell people, when you're shooting, do not worry yourself about the settings that somebody has done for you to try and get the same effect or the same image. It doesn't work like that because we are unique as creatives. Whichever camera, whichever settings that you use, it's okay if it comes out as different. You are unique and it is supposed to be in that manner. So we will go through to the settings, but do not worry yourself about sticking exactly to what the settings are. Feel free to be creative because this presentation is for someone who's willing to go wild. Someone who's willing to annihilate the status quo and say to yourself, look, I know this is what I've been shown, but I can also go an extra mile. So don't really worry yourself about the settings. The more mistakes you make, the better. So your histogram is basically going to be within the dial of your camera to help you see how dark the image is or how bright the image is. So you really want to keep it within the middle zone where it's not too dark, neither is it too bright. That way you avoid peaking and also you avoid having to try and then compensate for the light when you are in post-production. And then blinkies, these will be like the red lights or the blue lights that will show on your histogram to show you just how much you've overexposed or you're too dark. And then image stabilization. If you're using an old DSLR system like I have here with my Canon, it is usually within your lens. You just have to switch that to on-off because it helps within your camera so that you don't get stabilization which shows as noise or something shaky within your image because now your image and the camera are fighting against each other. And then long exposure noise reduction, you also have to switch that one off as per suggestion. And then your camera modes. Camera modes, as always, I always say to my friends, I shoot RAW. That is something that I also want to believe that we also do together. You have to shoot RAW and you have to shoot in manual mode. That way you have full control of your camera. Usually the one issue that I've noticed with shooting in all these other creative zones that come within the camera, I am basically telling the camera that I don't know what it is that I'm doing. Please help me do this, which is fine if you're still learning. But if you want to be a creative, you gotta go on to the manual mode, which fully helps you to just say, look, man, I am willing to make the mistakes so that I will learn how to go about it within my camera and knowing my settings. So usually I always advise, let us shoot in manual mode and we also have to shoot in RAW. And then white balance. If you see now, white balance, that was also the question that I had to ask from the first presentation, because I truly also needed to understand. So it has been answered, where you say, what if you're shooting on a friend's camera? What if you're shooting on a film camera? Then you do need to compensate for white balance. And then the ISO question was also discussed in the other presentation earlier before me, which is try and keep your ISO as low as possible. ISO 100, ISO 50, if you can be as high as ISO 250, that's fine. But the lowest ISO number that you can be able to achieve, the better. And then that is the introduction to the basics. Now that we have established that you can be able to do this within your image, then we jump into the creative projects. So what I hope to help you with once I'm done with this is to empower you to say, listen, I have my camera with, maybe it's been sitting down there collecting dust for ages. Maybe I can use it to help me try and bring life. So as I was here earlier on and I was speaking to people, the one question that I kept on asking everybody was, what brings you here? I was trying to determine whether something that I'm going to give today will be something that will be helpful to somebody. So if you're one of the people that I asked, what brings you here today, this is something that I hope will be something useful to your creative journey, because it hurts me, it pains me that there is so much creativity within us, but rarely do we have the time to just go out there and take the step and say, I want to create art, regardless of the fact that somebody might appreciate it or might not appreciate it. So that's that. Let's get into the creative zones. the advanced techniques with which we use our camera to do exposure light painting. So the first one would be light painting and hybrid photography, which we will try and reproduce what is called a starburst effect. So with me here, I have an image that I have just popped a little bit of rose onto this. This image, I took it in Cape Point, and looking at this image, I thought, wow, it's a good image, but definitely I can do more with this one. So from there, I then had to pick up my camera and do what is called hybrid photography. So hybrid photography is a term coined by Danny Bittencourt, where she says it's a way of giving an experience to a photo. Giving an experience to a photo so that it does tell story. So we are giving life to that image. So I also want to understand, does anybody in this room know what a starburst effect is? I see a hand there.
When you expose it for long enough, it flares out. And
That's it. Exactly. And does anybody know where you, within your creative zones, within your aperture settings, you start having a starburst effect? Good. How small do you need to go? That's it. Within the f16 aperture there, if you close it down to f16, then you can be able to do a starburst. This is one rule which is quite applicable to that. So I will just be able to show you a starburst effect here within our tools. So with me here, I have my image, which I've just poked some tiny holes within my camera, within my image, and then I will use this as a light source. From using that as a light source, I'll also use my camera. So within my camera, because I understood that we were not gonna have enough light that is dark enough within this space, then I had to add an ND filter, which is right here, so that we can cut down on the light. These are all the creative aspects that you are allowed to go through. So I'll just quickly do a quick illustration for you. We're gonna move down to F16, and then I'll ISO at ISO 100, and then I'll just turn down my shutter speed to 30th for a second, to 30 seconds, and then I'll zoom in. Now that we have the focus on our image, we would have to do for our exposure. So our settings for this were at 30 seconds, f16, and ISO 100. And then, because I do not have a release remote shutter, what then I have to do is to put down a countdown self-timer at 2 seconds. That way it allows for me to shoot without having to touch the camera, because I do not want any camera shot. Then I'll just turn on my torchlight for a light source. Then we have that. With a 2-second timer, and then within my image, the first exposure will be for me to just get a little bit of light within the front of the image, and then I go to the back. While it's through the holes, I just try and shoot through the lens towards my camera lens into, and then you just do a little bit of illumination while it's the painting and the countdown timer is going through, and then we have our exposure, and then we'll be good. From there, we just zoom in, and then from here, as you can see, it's not too quite clear from this side. I couldn't get any tethering, but as you can see, it's not quite there yet. So what we just do is turn down, try and go to F16, F18 or F20, and then we try that one more time. Then 2-second timer, capture with our focus. There we go. Okay, that was from Mitch Babin. There we go. That's our 30-second timer. And then we try one more time. And then we just look through. It's not getting there, but I'll just show you quickly here as we go on to Lightroom. As we go on to Lightroom and then we look through it, then we'll find that effect there within this image, where then using the same concept that I've just shown you here, you get these starbursts here that are just appearing within the image. And because you do not know exactly where the starburst effect will come out from, you then have to clean out the image, because if you see this image, there's quite a number of holes that I've just poked through the image. From there, you just clean them out with the patch healing tool in Lightroom, and then you just remain with a clean image such as what we have within the image that is on the screen right now. So we're looking at something between F16, ISO 100, and a 30-second exposure. You are also allowed to go higher than that, but because we do not have, we have so much ambient light within this room, I cannot possibly go higher than that without having to cut so much light. And then we do have another concept, which is light painting and zoom camera effects. But before I go further, do we have any questions? Am I speaking Greek? Please.
How and when do you incorporate the bulb feature on the camera?
Oh, good. So the bulb feature on the camera, you can incorporate it once you have what is called a shutter release. So the bulb feature, it's like you are telling the camera to say, I want to capture a long exposure shot, but I do not know how long I want to make that exposure, but it's definitely going to be 30 seconds or 2 minutes. So you just find a shutter release cable that you have to connect onto the side of your camera, and then within that you'll be holding your exposure for a long exposure, however you want it to be. And then once you are done, you just release the shutter release cable, and then the bulb function, that's how it works. Are you answered?
Yeah, but when do you use it?
Sorry?
When?
You can even use it here, so it provided that you have enough darkness within the space. I can even go longer than 30 seconds, but if I go longer than 30 seconds, it will be way too blown out, especially considering that the room is not too dark, so I wouldn't be able to move beyond 30 seconds in that regard. Exactly.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Are we on the same page? Perfect. Then I move on to light painting and hybrid photography, which then is a starburst, which then is light painting and in-camera effects, where we use zoom burst effect and kinetic light painting. So zoom burst effect is a concept that I learned from Peter Haroff, who is one of my big mentors, where now we're trying to create a good effect within an image, but we're trying to give movement or motion to that image, even though it's something that would not be rather interesting as an image. So what you're looking at here is my base image. This is a base photo that I had initially. In having this image, I then used my in-camera effects within my lens to say, okay, fine, that's a good image, but it's not interesting enough to me. Let me see if I can give life to it. So how do I go about it? I use the zoom burst effect, and then it gives you this effect of having at least 2 exposures within your shot. How do you go about it? It's like this. The first way is to first focus within the first exposure of your image, and once that focus has been set and you have your image well lit and exposed, then you can count down to do your zoom press. So I'll show you quickly here with the same image that we have standing over here. So the first thing that you want to do is to zoom in on your image as it is. Cut off add some light to my shot like this. And then once the image has been set into focus like this, whilst your camera lens is zoomed in, then what you do is to put on your timer. We have a 30-second timer here. So what I want to do is at 15 seconds, or maybe after, before now I have 10 seconds to go with my shot, then I can introduce my zoom. So I'll just do my focus. I have my focus now. Once I've set in my focus, I do my 2-second timer, and then it goes, and then I start counting. Because I have 30 seconds timer, then I start counting 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Then I go onto my lens. Because it's zoomed in, now I know that the next effect I'm gonna do is to zoom it out slowly. Slowly. There we go. And then that's the end of my shutter capture. Then it's quite, from here it's quite bright because it's way too big, but if I add another stop of light, we'll do that once more. We're at f20 now, ISO 100, and we're at 30-second exposure. So now it's zoomed out, but because we are at f20, that means everything that is here is focused to infinity. We will have to do the reverse and then zoom back in. And we just rotate our lens to zoom back in. Slowly and surely. There we go. And we do have a double exposure. I'll just go through again. Right, so now we're zoomed in on our image, f20, and we're just zooming to 30 seconds. Then ISO 100, we expose, then we shoot. So in the case of having a shutter release cable, or if you want to go higher than 30 seconds, you just press and hold, and then once that exposure is done, then you can release manually. So if you want to do it fully manual, that's when you can be able to do that with a shutter release cable. Then you zoom out. And there we go, we have a double exposure, which I'll be able to show you just now. But because my backlighting is quite white, I won't be able to fully bring it through, but something like what you're seeing on the screen here, where we have the same image, but it has been replicated. The reason why I keep emphasizing on all these in-camera effects, on all these ways of fully hands-on doing your own photography, is because nowadays we do have to contend with things such as Instagram, where the moment Instagram notices that you've put out an amazing image, immediately it takes it as an AI image. How does that happen? Even though you've done all this work as a way of just being creative, even if you've done it manually. I don't know if you have noticed that nowadays when you upload your photos to IG, it's like tagged immediately as an AI image. I don't know how many of us have noticed that. And What do you guys think about that?
Can I ask,
Please.
did you use generative film in your photo, or generative fill?
No generative fill in the image. The only thing that I do within the image is to just patch out and yield the spots of the other images which would have been illuminated.
Yeah.
And immediately it takes this. AI.
Are you doing that with spot removal or content aware fill?
I'm
Or
doing
are
that
you-
with content aware view and spot removal.
Okay, so you're not using the AI, because that's why it tags it. If it notices that you're using an AI-based solution, it just adds that in the metadata, and then when Instagram sees it, it says, hey, you used AI.
Perfect. And we all had the answer. Thank you. So it does note it from when it notices that you've done that within an AI metadata, then it takes it within the image. So within this in-camera effect, immediately you quickly zoom in within your image, and then you take it to move in a little forward. Now, we're also gonna do a zoom burst, but at this point, I do want to cut out, and I'll use a different illustrate image. With me here, I have a different image, and now I just want to do a 5-second zoom burst exposure. So now I do have to get rid of my light cutting ND filter, and we just quickly change our settings. Here we want something like 5 seconds or 2 seconds. Let's start with 5 seconds at F10. Let's do it at F11. And when I'm looking at my exposure compensation node here, it's telling me that the image is going to be overexposed. So we just, as you can see from our live view here, it's overexposed. And we just, let's try and see if we can go up to F18 or F20 at 5 seconds ISO 100. It's much better now. Let's find our focus. Right. So what we have now is we are trying to give life to a stationary image, as you can see right now. This image is stationary, but with in-camera effects, we do try and give it life. The whole reason being, let's not try and contend with this new AI technology that's coming. We can still be as creative as we are, using all the knowledge that we can have from just being a camera owner. You don't need much, you just need your camera. So from here, 5 seconds, F20 at ISO 100. With our focus set in, we're just gonna do our capture 2-second timer. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we zoom in and out, you let go, and then you have a double exposure. So I'll be able to show you quickly once we're done. I'll just quickly run you through some of these images as they come out from here, but I'll just do that for you once more. And this time around, I'm doing it at F22 or F26. We're on live zoom, and then live view, then we just view the image here and we find our focus. Now that the image is in focus, let's go to F32. We've just cut down some light with F32. Now we just do our 2-second timer. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then you zoom out, and then you have a double exposure. We'll try that one more time to just try and bring that creativity and life into an otherwise dead image, because there are moments when you walk up to a beautiful scenery and you notice that, well, I cannot be able to do a long exposure shot right now because maybe there's way too much reflections, you do not have your polarizer, and in that instance, it is quite difficult. But what I'm saying is, you don't have to be worried that you couldn't capture the image in that time. You can always go back home, create your own darkroom, and try and recreate the very same image that you thought was otherwise ugly when you did it on location. So from there, we just zoom in one last time at F32, that's 5 seconds, ISO 100, we capture, do our second timer, 2, 3, zoom out, and there we go. And then that way you end up having an image such as what you see here on the screen. And then now we have what is called kinetic light painting. But before we go there, does anybody have any questions regarding Zumber's effect? Yes, please.
So, if you have an image that was a bit noisy before because you took it on a long exposure, and now you're taking it.
I'm having trouble.
Would this help to get rid of some of the noise from the original image?
Would you mind repeating?
If you have an image that is a little bit noisy from taking it on a long exposure or high ISO, would this help because you now are using a really low ISO and taking a condensed version of the image to get rid of that noise?
So this is after you've already printed and got it to
Yes,
this stage.
yes.
So not to offend anybody, but when it comes to photography, I always say garbage in, garbage out. However, because you're a creative, nothing limits you to how far creative you can be. When you are, maybe you like the noise that is within the image. And also because you are re-photographing a photo that has already been photographed already, maybe that's the effect that you wanted. Of course, now with technology, you can try and cut down the noise using the artificial noise reduction.
And that makes it very flat and dead anyway.
That's the challenge now. Some people might prefer it, but I wouldn't prefer an image that is otherwise flat. So yes, but the way that you capture it is the way that would eventually come out as is. Are you answered?
What you can also do is put your lens cap on the camera and expose it for the same exposure of your long exposure. So now you have pretty much an image of your sensor and the noise, and you can layer that over the image that you've taken, and they cancel each other out in post-production.
Oh, okay.
So then you can do that without the AI.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Any more questions? None. Perfect. So now we move on to kinetic light painting. This concept now we're saying within the camera and the tripod that we have, we're just now moving the camera, not the light source. So in the concepts and the ideas that we've been talking of prior to this, what we've been doing is it's been the light source that has been moving. Now we are moving the camera on an axis instead of the light sources. So we're looking at something like a 5-second exposure and at an ISO 100, and between F9 and F16 you'll be able to go. You don't really need to cut down much light, you can be able to do this, but also it is dependent on how bright or how dark the environment in which you're shooting, and also how fast the subject that you're shooting is moving. But in this case, this works best when you're shooting something that is stationary. So with this, what we're going to be able to do is something like this. I will use the same image that we have on this axis, and then I'll just, within my tripod, I'll loosen the tilt that goes this way and that way, whilst I'm still focused on the image that I have. So I'll just quickly show you we're at 5 seconds, and then we move in and zoom in on our image, and whilst we're there, we lock in the focus. There we go. Lock in the focus. There we go. Now that we found our focus, the trick to getting a well-lit or a well-properly exposed image within kinetic light painting is to first, for the first for the two trimesters of the image, you expose just for the image. After that, then you tilt the camera on its axis. So how we're gonna do this? We have 5-second exposure. So at 5-second exposure, let's say maybe at 3 seconds, then you tilt the camera on the axis to get that twirly effect that you're looking for within your shot. So from here, you have this f32, 5-second exposure at ISO 100. We find the zoom and focus on our image, and then we press. And then you just unlock the tilt of your camera, and then you just move it. So I was a little bit too late there. Let's try that one more time. Right, let's do that one more time. And tilt it on the same axis. There we go. And you get something a little bit twirly. Let's try that one more time. This time around, maybe at 2 seconds, and maybe in the other direction. That's it. So now I have a bit of an effect within that image, which I'll then be able to show you once we do, once we get into Lightroom. But basically, it's something that will give you these twirlies, and then within these twirlies, you get the central focus after you fully exposed for your image within the first exposure before moving and tilting your camera. And then, do we have any questions within that part? Yes, please, at the back.
When you filter your camera, it's taking it off the axis, so the tripod usually has to filter a little bit to your lens.
That's it.
Take it off the axis.
So,
It's easier if you use this moving mount and take it plane.
would you mind coming again? Would it be easier if?
So you're taking it off axis, so to get the background in focus, it's easier for you to put your picture in blur, or it's going to move the central point. So the small ring mount is going to be easier with the small ring mount, which actually keeps the camera on the same plane.
That's it. So remember, the image that you're having to expose for, because I said you have to first expose for it to be in focus within the first 5 or the first 4 seconds, the tilt is gonna only be for the last seconds to make the blurry effect. Are you answered? Perfect. And then another person?
So basically, for an image like that, you would expose it, say, for example, a 5-second exposure, like you say. Those first 3 seconds, that's essentially to get the static image that you see. That is an example of the light there.
Exactly.
Once you've got that sort of burnt in, your in-focus image, the last 2 seconds you spin it, and that gives you the effect on top of your...
Exactly. That's it.
Okay.
Exactly. That's how you then get the twirling on top of the main exposure. Please?
Hi, just a quick one. Are you just giving us an idea of how you would do it? Because the previous image obviously has a lot of lights in it, that the lights are giving you that twirly look. So I'm assuming the shot that you're doing now is not necessarily going to give us that look. You're just showing us how it's going to look.
That's how it would look. So the lights that are in this image are probably from the street lights, because as you can see, they're shooting upwards towards the buildings. So that's when they would be able to come through, but that's not exactly how then you would be able to exactly replicate something like this. But the concept is still the same.
Okay, excellent.
Any more questions? We are good. Perfecto. And then we then get to the last creative project, which is image fragmentation, light painting and image fragmentation, which is something that I learned from Martin Osner of the Martin Osner Art Gallery, Fine Art Gallery. So, like I did mention earlier on, with all these ideas and concepts, the main idea is you've gone on a shoot, one of your own creative shoots, and you're not particularly happy with the images that you got from there. Then you say to yourself, maybe I can come up with something out of these images. So what you'll then be able to do is to say, now I am on my own. How can I give life to these images. So with me here, I have a few water glasses which are clear. And the image that I've taken and torn apart is the same image that I have here as my base photo. So the results that I'll be able to show you on the screen are the same results that I got from having this as the base image, making it go through the process of being torn apart, put into a glass, and then having to photograph it to come up with a concept or an idea. So the fragmentation is me tearing this image so that it becomes something else a little different. So that's our base photo there. And then, so how you go about doing image fragmentation is first, you do need to have a base photo. The base image that you have, then you turn it off. It doesn't really matter how you put it into aspect or how you line them up. The most important thing is at least they are in a line. That way you can be able to say that it's the same image. So with me here, I'm only limited to 3 images. I can place them in whatever order it is that I want. Remember, I am being creative, so I am allowed to go bananas when it comes to me creating whatever it is that we have to create. So from here, I'll just put them right next to each other. Once they are like this, I find my focus. I find my focus on the glasses, which I'll show you just now. And just zoom in. There we go. Find our focus. So basically what you want to do within this effect is to say, whatever exposure that I have, it has to give me the effect that I'm looking for. Because at this point, it just has to be blurry enough to create something artistic, something that can be appealing, because you do have that creative license. And I'll just cut down slightly to F22 at 5 seconds or even less. At 3.2 seconds, I find my zoom like this. And then I'll just take my exposure. There we go. Now that we have the image exposed as is, the next thing that we want to introduce is our light painting technique. So feel free to use whichever tool that you would prefer to use. In my regard, I might want to use my cell phone, or you can use one of these tungsten lights, which will be fine for you. And then, within the exposure, we've got 3.2 seconds, and then you just light between these glasses so that at least it focuses onto your lens. Once it focuses onto your lens, it then shines through the images to give an effect such as you see within this image and these other images here. Good. As you can see within this image here, there we got it shining through the glasses towards that to create something different, something that you would otherwise not be able to see in a general specific environment when you just walk into a shoot. Because one thing that I've often realized is, especially with landscape photographers, they always say it's not good to shoot on a day that is not cloudy. Landscape photographers, they really like this thing where it's moody and it gives some oomph to an image. So now I am saying, don't let the fact that it's a sunny, bright day hinder you from going out to have a shoot. Go out, take those photos. When you bring them back home for post-production, you can be able to create something like this. And this is gallery work type of creativity. This is the type of work that you're gonna be able to hang out and you can have a conversation. How did you create something like this? And unless you tell someone that you had to put your images into a glass such as this, nobody will be able to tell. Nobody will be able to tell. So with that said, there we go, these are some of the other effects so that it's blurry, but also behind within the image, you can still be able to see that this is something that was done within an in-camera effect within your time. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, that's another effect as you can see from here, that is a zoom burst effect, where I am saying, I took the image while it was first focused within the first 3-4 seconds, and then in the last 5 seconds, I move my lens and then it zooms it out, giving life to that image. That is another way that you can be able to create that. And then these are also the other effects, another zoom burst effect. Unless you had told someone, they would just think, wow, that's a beautiful landscape image that you have done. Ladies and gentlemen, like I said, my name is Sakunda Chikomo, and my time here is up. And I just want to give credit to my sources, Danny Bittencourt of, she is the one who introduced me to hybrid photography, which is something that I've fallen in love with. And Martin Osner of Martin Osner Fine Art Gallery here in Hood Bay, and also Peter Haroff, who stands as one of my biggest mentors. At this point, I'm really happy with what I've said. Do we have any questions as to what I've just spoken on? Any questions? None. Perfect. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, everyone. So we're going to have a lunch break now, and then when you guys come back, we're going to have